Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. I am RDY. Joining me today are
Barak Malkin,
Ethan Lane Miller,
Isaac Brynjegard-Bialik.
Wait, who's that?
What?
Wait, did somebody break into the Rakudi?
The door was wide open. You guys have no security here whatsoever.
That's right, friends, folks, listeners. We have our first guest with us. As you know, in each episode, the host leads a discussion of what we lovingly call a Torah smash, a collision of something from the world of Judaism with an aspect from nerd culture. The other co-hosts don't know the topic being presented, so try and guess the pairing along with them. Today, we are trying something a little different with a guest host. We hope having guest hosts will become a regular part of Torah Smash, and our very first guest host is the personification of a Torah Smash. What he does for a living is a Torah Smash. And you know how sometimes when spouses will say, hey, you like baseball and he likes baseball, why don't you two go in the corner and talk about baseball? Well, that's never happened to me because sports ball, but I was at a bat mitzvah backyard barbecue celebration several years ago. And shout out to the Shaket Briskin family, wonderful, wonderful, nerdy family. And my wife and Rabbi Shana Brynjegard-Bialik were talking, and they said, oh, hey, our husbands should go talk about comic books. So Isaac Brynjegard-Bialik and I were shoved into a corner to talk about comic books. And instead of being an awkward conversation, it ended up being one of the, to me, most illuminating and insightful conversations I've had about comic books and Judaism, maybe in my life before Torah Smash existed. So I am so happy to introduce Isaac Brynjegard-Bialik, who works as a paper cut artist, mashing comic books with Jewish text and beautiful art all together. And he and his wife, Rabbi Shana Brynjegard-Bialik, do paper midrash together, where they take their show on the road to synagogues across the country, and I'm sure they would go all over the world if you only asked them. And they show their art, and they allow us participants to actually do our own paper cuttings. But without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, nerds of all shapes and sizes, Isaac Brynjegard-Bialik.
Thank you for that really overlong introduction. I'm not sure that I'm worthy of it, but I'll try to live up to the hype.
He's never introduced us that way.
Yeah.
You're no Isaac Brynjegard-Bialik.
That's touche.
I'm really glad to be here with you guys, though. Your reputation does precede you, Barak and Ethan. We are new to friendship, but I'm sure it will outlast this podcast. I mean, not that the podcast won't live forever. I feel like I'm stepping in this deeply. This is gonna be a lot of fun. I've only ever been on one other podcast, and I bring it up only because I think you guys would be interested in that podcast. It was someone who was watching all of the classic Adam West Batman episodes in order. And then he and his co-host and whatever guest would then break down the episode and just have a blast talking about how wonderful and awful the shows were. I was in on an episode. Mr. Freeze was the villain. It was classic. So I'm nearly a virgin when it comes to podcast guest hosting. And
so you were on Hollywood Babylon?
Oh no, I wish. Oh, that is a cast. I mean, this was a lesser known cast, probably. So.
Well, let me ask, is that podcast still going? Like, what's the karma you're bringing to this show?
That is an excellent question. It is, God, there's a really sad, morbid answer to that question. So you will probably, possibly, as you edit, you'll jump past this, but suffice it to say, not all of the hosts of that podcast are still with us on this mortal plane.
Wow.
So,
they've entered the multiverse.
Yes, let's say they've entered the multiverse. So I don't know if that is a good. No, it's probably not. That's probably not an optimistic outlook for you three. But we'll see what happens. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. I have nothing.
At least that's what you told the police.
That is what I think.
You can't prove
I'm
it.
feeling great about being on the podcast.
It was my dream. I'm going to spoil virtually every movie that's come out in the past 10 years. I had this dream once that Harrison Ford was going to come back to every movie he'd ever been in, revisit the character, and then have them die in that movie. That was I had this awesome vision. And for a while, it looked like we were maybe going to be there. I think there's something to be said for, a character who is beloved, who you have connected to, and the real tragedy of having them die and not return. There are few properties in which we really see that.
Yeah.
Often, that sort of death of Superman or whomever it may be.
It's not forever.
It's not as emotional because we know it's not real. We know it's not going to stick. I don't think we're going to see Han Solo again. Certainly not older. Maybe younger. But we're not going to see him older. He's good and gone. There you go. I've spoiled Star Wars for you.
Well,
wasn't he gone? And then he came back in episode 9.
Was he like a Force ghost or something?
Well, he can't be a Force ghost because he's not a Jedi. So, was it in Kylo Ren's mind? I don't know.
I feel like the Force, though, you can be Force sensitive even if you're not a Jedi. This is not my topic, by the way.
I think that I think they were teasing at that though with that one person, I forget his name, who was going to tell Rey something, and they said that they were going to share. He never shared, but you can sense. I think
it was Finn. Finn had some big thing. Yeah.
I think he was going to say that he was Force sensitive or something, and I think they're trying to. I think what you were saying, Isaac, that people who are not Jedis are Force sensitive, and I think that was what they were doing with Hans. I totally agree.
If it is truly a Force that binds us all, Han Solo. Oh, spin off.
Oh, right. It's some Scottish or other. All the characters have this accent going on.
I would love to see Hans Solo. I think there's some potential there.
Hans Solo.
There you go. Yeah.
Und his pistols of death.
The Force
Scoundrel.
You're going to meet my brother Franz Solo.
Oh no! We are here to blow you up? I guess would be
Okay. I think we have veered way off course.
This is going to be a really
my mouth hurts.
Podcast episode. Strap in.
Oh my god, my cheeks hurt from laughing. Oh my gosh.
That's good.
It is good.
Sign.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, if you start to feel a pain traveling down your arm.
Right.
Then Isaac does kill podcast.
Why are you so experienced with bad things happening?
How do you know that?
Hosts?
Is that the first sign of when people have you as a podcast guest? The first sign is this pain. Is first you get the sore cheeks, and then you get this arm pain.
The sore cheeks are definitely symptom 1. That's how you know that it has started.
Yeah. All right. So why don't you jump us in with your? I'm really curious about your Torah Smash topic.
All right. So as David mentioned, what I do in my work is I'm mixing up Jewish text and comic books. And I always say when I talk about the work that I start with text. So that's what I'm going to start with here. I've got a Jewish text. Mm-hmm. I've got a verse from Bamidbar that I am going to read to you. And that is going to be your first clue as to what we're going to be talking about today. All right.
Awesome.
Bamidbar, chapter 11, verses 4 through 6. Some of you are already, I know out there in the audience, you already know what this is about, possibly.
Can I ask the portion name? What's the Torah portion? Oh, Bamidbar.
Oh, you can. I mean, it's in the book of Bamidbar. I have no idea what the parsha is. I could probably very easily look that up. I'm not going to bother. Okay. You can look it up later. That'll be in the director's cut of the podcast.
Yeah, right.
We'll have David come in, sotto voce, explaining what the parsha is, what Rashi has to say. And
for Susan, a parsha is a portion of the week in the Torah, and Bamidbar is the book of Numbers.
Is Susan a real person or a generic listener name that we use for people who are unaffiliated with Jewish terminology?
We'll never tell. It's our sister. We each have a sister named Susan, who's not really a nerd, and so she needs things explained.
I like that. Okay. For the 3 Susans, sure. Which also great band name. or possibly the
The
sequel
Three
to Hans
Susans?
Solo. Hans Solo and the Three Susans. All right, here's your quote. Bamidbar, Book of Numbers, chapter 11, verses 4 through 6. The Israelites wept and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish that we used to eat in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Now our stomachs are shriveled. There is nothing at all, nothing but this manna."
Ooh,
Is
that's it?
The Gathering?
He said comic books.
Oh, right.
Is
He
there
did say
Magic the Gathering comic book?
It is not Magic the Gathering comic book. I don't know Magic the Gathering enough to know why you would even guess that, but now
Mana.
I'm sort of interested. Oh, is there a mana card or something you can play?
That's how you play is by tapping mana.
Oh,
Oh,
nope.
I didn't know that
not-
either.
It is not.
All right, so it's this food portion and something with comic books. Can I ask,
Mhm.
is it Marvel, DC, or independent?
You can ask.
How generous.
Is
It is. I mean, I could answer it.
yeah, that would
It's
be
Marvel.
great. That would be great.
It is Marvel.
Comics.
The
Marvel
Marvel comics world that
Okay.
I am going to be getting
Is there
into.
some sort of cook
Food.
or chef in the Marvel comics?
Like if you
world?
said DC, I would have guessed you were going with like Condiment Man or something. some
Oh,
Ah,
some
sure. Although
food-based villain. But is there a food-based hero of sort? Like,
or is it about starving? Is it about? It's not like Tower of Babel. Oh no, that's DC.
is
think
there?
that's
Let me ask you:
Torah, actually.
is it? Are we going on like a specific storyline, or just an overall character or theme of Marvel?
great question. It is a character that we're going to be getting back
Okay,
to.
specific character.
Oh gosh, I am
Somebody who
very
like
out of my element.
somebody who hates food, or just
Yes, you know that famous superhero who hates food.
right.
They were bitten by radioactive food as a
I'm
child
You know,
and have
yeah.
sworn fight against.
I this is not going to be it, but I know that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it is known that Robert Downey Jr. loves snacking, and that's the reason that Iron Man is always eating in the movies. Like, he hid snacks around set. So I don't think we're talking about Iron Man because in the comics he was not that obsessed with food.
Food is not too
he
bad.
hid snacks. That's why there's a lot of the like in the first Avengers movie. He asked if the guy wants a blueberry. He had hid blueberries on that set. Like,
And I should say, for what it's worth, Barack, you couldn't be colder. So
Is there was like a flaming cucumber at one point?
no,
Like-
it's flaming carrots, and that was
Flaming Carrot
yeah.
comics, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Also
a
not it.
different. Yeah,
Oh, and Captain Carrot is also DC, so that's out of it.
yeah.
And Banana Man is not Marvel.
Is Banana Man a real thing, or is this your headcanon?
Banana. I wish I had a headcanon. That would be cool.
Is it like the Blob? He ate a lot, but that wasn't why he was big.
No, I think he ate a lot because he was big. It's not the Blob.
Right. Is it like Quicksilver consumed a lot of food because of his high metabolism? It's not Quicksilver.
It's not. I have another quote, which
Sure.
maybe will help
Yeah.
drive you in the correct direction. I thought about this. I thought, what is a quote that I can give that is misleading enough to be interesting, but might get them there? And then I realized, well, we really don't want to have a 4-hour episode in which you try and guess what's in my head. So
Thank you.
I'm going to jump ahead a few verses. We're still in chapter 11. We're
Cool.
now in verse 18. And I'll paraphrase. God and Moses are having a conversation. And in the standard, it was my JPS Tanakh translation, God is telling Moses he is sick of the Israelites whining all the time. That is the word whining that the translation uses. God says he hears the Israelites saying, "Indeed, we were better off in Egypt." And I just love God complaining to Moses about the Israelites complaining. But that's the quote, God complaining that the Israelites are complaining, we were better off in Egypt. So that should maybe focus your guessing a little more.
Yeah, I think we're way off on the food. Now I'm thinking we're looking for like a complaining superhero or a complaining villain.
Like Moon Knight.
Somebody who's always like
I feel
whining that they're whining, or that so like a very negative. No, that's DC. They're DC.
Barak, I love the idea. First of all, yes, I think what defines the Marvel universe is that they're all complaining. But it would be wrong of me to ignore a correct guess. So, David, RDY, talking Moon Knight.
Oh wow, very nice.
Now, what clued you in to Moon Knight?
The focus on Egypt, going back to Egypt, and being better off in Egypt, and the whining.
Very nice. This is great. Are we doing like character from the comics? Or are we tying into the series?
So the way I want to talk about Moon Knight, and I have seen the whole series, but the way I want to talk about Moon Knight is more core to the character, regardless of platform.
Cool. This is very exciting.
My interest in him is originally from the comics, but is consistent with what I've seen in the TV show. And which is his obsession with Egypt, which I think is possibly one of the most Jewish things about him.
Awesome.
Nice.
That's great. This is so good. We talked about this in the past of like doing a Moon Knight episode. We talked about his portrayal in the show of like not being Jewish, but he did a great job portraying a Jewish superhero. And this is very exciting. Thank you for bringing Moon Knight. This is great.
It's my pleasure. I love Moon Knight. We have talked about him, my wife and I, when we do our little history of Jews in comics. He comes up a lot because he's one of the earliest canonically Jewish superheroes, although he gets there in a sort of odd way. Do you think a little biographical sketch of Moon Knight would be useful at this point?
That sounds great.
Especially for Susan.
Especially for Susan. I'll direct my comments to Susan. So Moon Knight was first introduced as pretty much a villain, as a side character in a comic called Werewolf by Night from the mid-70s. And he was introduced because they needed some sort of a foil for the hero. The werewolf is the hero. That's why Moon Knight has this whole moon thing, and his weapons are silver, because those are traditionally things that you could use against a werewolf. Now, the guy who wrote the character Moon Knight, Doug Mensch, one of the things, also not a Jewish guy, He's a
mensch. This is wonderful.
Oh, it was right there.
It is. You'd think so. But the reason that he names his character Mark Spector, which is how Moon Knight first appears, is he would name his characters after people that he knew. This was just a thing that he did. Apparently, it was easier than coming up with new names. And there was a guy that he knew who worked down at his local comic book shop, whose name was Mark Spector, who had always been pestering him, when are you going to name a character after me? So he named Moon Knight after Mark Spector, and he's starting to put together the idea of him, and that's when he learns that the real-life Mark Spector is a Jewish person working in a comic shop. I know we're all shocked. And so Doug says, oh, well, I guess Moon Knight's Jewish, which is a sort of crazy way to get there. And in fact, I've got a quote that I dug up specifically for you guys, and he talks about, I guess this is Doug Mensch. He says, I guess I just made up the first Jewish costumed hero, so maybe I should research some Judaism and stuff about the Mideast and the Mossad and all this other stuff. And that's where all that stuff came from. So
that's
having
fantastic.
Backed into it, he did a little research and decided that his character would have a rabbi as a father. And you may recall there are villains in the Moon Knight universe who seem to pull their names from Judaism as well. One of his big bad guys is named Zohar, which is one of our books of Jewish mysticism. But so from starting as this sort of, not even an anti-hero, but really just a villain foil for Werewolf by Night, became popular. They sort of reworked him as a hero. He gets his own series, and he stumbles around as Jewish, but not really integral to his character for probably a half a dozen years.
That's great. Can I say, I think it's wonderful that the creator was like, oh, the guy's Jewish. And so he then fully committed. He could have easily not done that because he had envisioned him. I would say that he probably, quote, envisioned him without a religion, but honestly in his head was likely some sort of American Christian, right? As like people assume in these things. And so that's awesome that he just fully dedicated the backstory and was able to make that part of his thing. And I'll also say, if there's any other comic book creators out there, I think Barack Malkin is a wonderful name. If you're looking for a new superhero, just I'll throw that out there.
Side note for, shout out to Brynjegard-Bialik. Stan Lee used to make his character names alliterate for a similar reason to Mensch. He couldn't remember names, so he would make them start with the same syllable, with the same sound, so that he could remember them more easily.
That's fun.
Yeah, he was a great, but he did have some crazy reasonings behind a lot of his decisions. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Colossal Boy and the Legion of Superheroes. Again, a little tangent.
Not quite. Yeah,
so Colossal Boy is one of the original Legion of Superheroes characters. He came out in the 60s. He was just a regular guy from whatever planet. All of the superheroes in that strip are 1,000 years in the future. In the mid-'80s, they got a new writer for the series, and the writer happened to be Jewish, and he saw the character's actual name, which was Gim Alon, Gimalon. And this writer says, that name sounds Israeli. I think Colossal Boy is probably Israeli, and made him Jewish.
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
of Israeli descent. So Colossal Boy also has a Jewish backstory. There's a great picture of him you can find online where he's celebrating Hanukkah with his tiny little parents. And it's one of those situations where the name inspired a later writer to play with him as a Jewish character. And that's actually similar to what happened to Moon Knight. I mean, he was already Jewish, but it wasn't until, as I said, like a half a dozen years later that someone else came along and really fleshed out his story and made his dad a Holocaust survivor who was a rabbi and came to America, and like really builds in this whole Lower East Side background for him and really dives into the Jewish stuff. But it does make you wonder, perhaps, if Mark Spector, if Moon Knight is such a Jewish hero, and he always has been, what's the deal with all the Egypt stuff? I know a lot of people keep asking that. And how can he work for an Egyptian god if he's a monotheist, if he believes in the one true Jewish God? What's the deal with Khonshu and the Egyptian deities and the pantheon, all of that?
I think you can work, like there's plenty of, Christian superheroes who then have some other gods that they're serving, and nobody says, how come this Christian person isn't serving Jesus? Like, it's just, he stumbled into this negative scenario that forced him to give in to Khonshu, and I think that's his story. And I'm not upset with it.
Yeah, I think of the non-Jews who work at synagogues or Jewish community centers. You're in the family.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But
Also, what would this comic look like if the God who was controlling him to do these things was like the Almighty God? if the person sending him with these powers to do these bad things, that wouldn't have worked either.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously want to, I think, steer clear of offending any major mainstream religions when you put out a popular product, and I don't know that there was a big lobby for the ancient Egyptian pantheon at the time. They weren't afraid of offending anyone. But right.
I hear they have a super PAC now.
With a cape and everything, like that sort of a super PAC? Or
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
But like most Jews, I will never ask a question without already having an answer for you, right? The reason that I led with that quote from Bamidbar, and this is what I want to ask you about, I think, so Mark Spector is sometimes portrayed as having DID, right? A disorder in which he imagines multiple personalities, that sort of thing.
That's
We're not going to talk about
dissociative
that.
Identity disorder, for those that were curious what the DID was.
I'm not going to touch that topic here. It's well beyond my knowledge base. But what's interesting about in the comics, they often play with, is he really serving an Egyptian god, or is he just suffering from a disorder? And different writers have interpreted it in different ways, and I'm not sure that there's really any solid canon. I believe that Moon Knight, that Mark Spector, I think he's a little bit, I don't know if it's fair to say crazy. I think he has a disorder. The Egyptian thing is all in his head, it is in my mind, because we as a people are obsessed with Egypt. Not just because we're wandering in the desert, we just left slavery and we're asking about the cucumbers, but think about how many times a year we talk about being slaves in Egypt, being rescued from being slaves in Egypt, wandering through the desert. I mean, the mezuzah that we put on every single door in our house, the mezuzah is a throwback to being in Egypt. We are constantly remembering that time and using it to inform who we are. I think that's where Moon Knight's coming from. I think it makes it even more Jewish.
Well, there's no reason for most mitzvot in the Torah. Most of the time you do it. Why? Because I said so, or more often, because I brought you out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that we say the phrase about why should you treat other people well because you were strangers in Egypt, right? That is also one of the driving forces behind what we do and how we behave in the world, and it all goes back to Egypt. I mean, that's Mark Spector's obsession right there.
That's a great point. There was when I was a youth professional in LA, I was trying to create this trip to New York for the teens, and I happened to be stuck is the wrong word, but on a bus next to Dr. Betsy Stone for like 2 hours. And she had said that my tour of New York felt like it was like visiting a zoo. Here's this thing, here's that thing, here's that thing, no connection. She said, you got to create some sort of connection to it so you're not just looking at these things. And so then I created this narrative story of like, the immigration story to New York, but using a very similar framework, just like when we went forth from Egypt, and used that as like the starting point and sort of framed it around that language to connect it to our ancestors. And that was the whole framing for that trip, was based out of because we went forth from Egypt. And this is an annual thing that we discuss is Egypt. This is a very interesting connection.
You can also say that it took, it took a moment for the sea to split and get the Israelites out of Egypt, but it took 40 years to get Egypt out of the Israelites.
Well, there's a reason that no Israelites who were slaves in Egypt make it into the land of Israel, including Moses. Right. I believe what we say is that, it's hard to shake off those shackles, those figurative shackles, and that you needed a fresh group of people who could really be that free people without the shadow of Egypt, and yet it still looms over us.
Right.
So that's fine, but he still has powers, right?
No, he has no powers.
He he doesn't fly. He soars with his wings thing.
He regenerates, doesn't he?
No, in the show he does.
The one thing that you might be able to call a consistent power is that he occasionally dies and is brought back to life. That's his origin story. That's how Khonshu first finds him.
Is that it?
See
just
that in the
resurrection?
Just the resurrection, which is a great power, certainly. Technically, he doesn't have any powers other than occasionally being revived from the dead by Khonshu. It's not something that he is able to do himself. Yes, he is super fast and strong, but those are all things that you could attribute to his training when he was in the Marines or in the CIA. In the comics, he doesn't really have any supernatural powers. I don't know that mysterious. You could say, yeah. And if you believe in Khonshu and you believe that that's the magic or the divine stuff, then the suit and all of that and turning back the sky, all of that isn't stuff that Mark does. That's stuff that's done for him or to him. He's just a guy.
So is Moon Knight Moses? Is Moses Moon Knight?
Nobody can say for sure. We haven't seen him since we entered Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you guys made a much better case for Superman being Moses than I could make for Moon Knight being Moses. But, I mean, he is swaddled up in that uniform, the little outfit. He could be swaddled like a little baby. I don't know if he has a basket. Sure, why not? I mean, that's what's great about these stories. It's what I love about comics in general, is that you keep coming back to them and then you say, well, what if this? Or what if that? What if it was written this way? Or what if this different thing happened? I mean, there's a whole line in Marvel, right, of the what if comics. We saw the TV series as well. But the fact that we can come around and play with it, as long as you don't mess with the core of what Moon Knight is or what any of these characters are, we have so much room to play with their stories and see how they make sense to us, especially since Moon Knight's dad is not a Holocaust survivor in the TV series. He can't be because the timing is off. Because this is now 60 years later after when Moon Knight was originally created.
They also didn't identify the dad as a rabbi per se, but they had a shiva sitting for the funeral service. But that's the only. So we got that he's Jewish, but I don't know if they've decided or not decided what his family background is.
No. We saw the shiva. He's wearing a kippah, right? We saw a mezuzah on what is ostensibly his mother's apartment. He's wearing a Jewish star in that nice reflect. Right? We all did those freeze frames to see exactly those panels, or not panels, but shots. Definitely Jewish. I don't think they're going to go any deeper into like what synagogue does he attend or what movement does he adhere to.
Fine. It's
I'd watch that episode.
It's not really part of his story.
He's not like Billy,
right?
No, it's not. I mean, one of my favorite characters is Wiccan, also from Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about spoiling the entire Marvel Universe for people who haven't read the comics.
No, I think we talked about this on our WandaVision episode. I'm pretty sure we dove either that or the maybe it was the Doctor Strange episode. We dove into how the Marvel Universe views patrilineal lineage, whether it's from the dad or the mom, and who's Jewish, who's not Jewish. So yes, we know, our listeners at this point know that Magneto, therefore Wanda Maximoff, therefore Wiccan is Jewish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Billy Kaplan in the comics is canonically a Reform Jew, not just Jewish, but he is specifically Reform, which as a Reform Jew myself, I love. I love that the guy who created him took the time to really drill down that it was important that we know what movement. But yeah, I don't know that we're going to get that with Oscar Isaac. So
probably
I don't
not.
think so.
No, I mean, I feel like the presence of a Latino Jew, right? I'm going to assume Sephardic. I'm going to assume that based on the casting is awesome. I love that so much. I love showing the diversity of the movement. I love showing the diversity of the heroes. I love that it gives so many people a chance to see themselves in the story.
Well, I love that it wasn't upfront, but it's also not hindering or guiding the storyline, right? Often when a Jewish character's Judaism comes forward, it is the part of that conversation that needs to be talked about. And so the fact that he just has a shiva for his family, like words unspoken, that is amazing representation that we don't get regularly. If we went to a service with a shiva at a TV show, or it's because the family was Jewish and you've learned about them being Jewish and they've talked about it and the rabbi's there and he makes some sort of moil joke at the funeral, whatever it is.
One of the things that I really liked about it is that Shiva was just normalized. They didn't go, hey, look, everybody, it's a Shiva minion, and here's what we do. It was just a part of his life. When someone dies, that's what you do. And the same thing is true about America Chavez. We talked about in the Doctor Strange episode, where she was, very obviously LGBTQ. She had the pride pin. She had the jacket that's from the comic books that had that addition of amor es amor. Love is love, and just it's part of our world. That's how people are. They're different and varied and wonderful, and it's great.
Yeah.
So I'm someone who is not very versed into the comics. Like, I understand general comic tropes, but for me, getting involved in the MCU has been this wonderful introduction for me to these characters. And I will confess, watching Moon Knight, going into it, I didn't realize he was Jewish. And the Shiva, it was a real, oh my God moment where I was like, oh, wow. Like, I get this. Like, I understand what's going on. And I think it was you, Barack, who was mentioning earlier that it wasn't made to be a big deal. It was just, this is who he is. This is just part of his culture. And it was, I don't know if profound's the right word, but it landed in a very cool way for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways to do this, right? There's the horrible, everyone's having a Christmas party and your Jewish character comes in and they're holding a bottle of Manischewitz and they're like, I've got jelly donuts too, right? That the obnoxious, like, throw it in your face. No one wants that. Unfortunately, that is the way that we treat Judaism a lot in pop culture, in comics. We've seen a lot of that in the past. Then there's the sort of casual, well, they're Jewish, but that's just their background. That's who they are, which is how they're doing it in Moon Knight in the TV series, I think. That just happens to be it. It's not a big deal. Or like in the Punisher TV series. Did you guys watch Punisher?
Yeah.
So there's a scene in Microchip's house where on the wall in their dining room you can see their ketubah.
I remember that.
I missed that.
Only if you're looking for a ketubah will you see a ketubah, but I saw it. So there's that subtle way. The third way, which I think is hard to do, but when you do it well is great, and this is a whole other episode, is the Kitty Pryde way. Where
100%. I'm waiting for that.
Her Judaism informs who she is as a hero explicitly, no matter who the creator. I think Brian Bendis probably did it best, but where their Judaism is a real plot point, the show, the comic revolves around it. We're not going to see
constantly not a movie. I really hope that we get that. I really want, when we get to Kitty Pryde, for her to be anxious about her bat mitzvah. She is constantly in the comics. I'm also really hoping that when we get the Fantastic Four, right, eventually the Thing in the comics really has some outward Judaism aspects to him in the Lower East Side and his connections. And so we've talked about it a little bit in the past, but I'm sure we'll get to that. I'm sure RDY probably has an episode in the future.
I have a 3-hour class I could teach on it.
I'm really hoping that we get a Kitty Pryde who's anxious about her bat mitzvah, 100%.
I mean, she doesn't have to be anxious about it.
Well, I think most teens are a little anxious about it. Can I ask you a question?
I'm sure she'll get right through it.
Oh.
Isaac, can I ask you a question on this Moon Knight stuff?
You can't. No, we're done. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you, folks. I guess that's the beginning. You started with the mana quote, and we were all focused on the food. Is there any sort of fun food connections that Moon Knight has, or did we totally misread your opening clue?
Can I tell you how desperately I want to be able to answer that?
Moon pies.
He always has, moon pies or poppy seed Hamantaschen, are a key part of it. Again, Susan, so poppy in German and Yiddish is moon. So the way we used to talk about poppy seed Danish and Hamantaschen is moon flavor.
I didn't know that. You could just direct that to me next time. I love poppy seed.
I'm gonna go deeper on that one. In fact, the article ha in Hebrew means the, and tashin is pocket. So really hamuntashin is the poppy pocket. So which means poppy is the only flavor of a real hamuntashin.
Oh, I love that.
I'm glad we were on the same page here. But no, other than those accidental, casual cognates, false cognates, I have nothing for you on Moon Knight and food.
Wait, what was that? Was it just because they were in Egypt? That was the opening quote connection?
Yeah. Because they were
their life for Egypt.
Even outside of Egypt, so much of their life revolved around remembering when they were in Egypt.
Got it. Okay.
The food was a bit of a
a
red herring, if you will.
That was good. Good.
Pickled red herring.
Yeah, probably a pickled red herring.
That's my new superhero, the red herring.
That's amazing.
Definitely Jewish. I don't know what her powers are yet. I'll figure it out.
She can transform to cream or no cream.
And just when you think you've caught her, she's not even there. She's somewhere else entirely. You were misled. Yeah, there's something.
Love it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean I love Moon Knight, and Ethan, you were saying that you didn't know he was Jewish going into it, and you had that aha moment. For the social media world, which I dip my toe in as little as possible, but I remember all of the conversations about will he or won't he be Jewish, and this anticipation because you want your characters to be the way you remember them, and we all have different ideas sometimes about what those core concepts are. For a lot of us, Moon Knight has to be Jewish, and it was going to be very disappointing if he wasn't. And the fact that they were being very coy about it, and they were like, yeah, just hold on, we'll get to, just keep watching the show. When it finally came, there was this big sigh of relief that not only did they do it, but they were doing it well. And I think that's part of it, is there's this sense that, as I said, there's these inalienable characteristics about our favorite heroes. Moon Knight's Jewish. I'm not sure that that's as important to him as it is to the Thing or to Kitty Pryde. Superman is the Boy Scout, right? Batman is a detective and he wants to avenge the deaths of his parents. Spoiler alert. All of these characters have certain things about them, and if you remove them, if you take the wrong thing away, you don't have that character anymore. So when Superman kills Zod in Man of Steel, right, you'd say, oh, well, that's obviously not Superman, because that's just not right. So we have to be very careful, I think, when as creators, as people who, whether it's a podcast or art, or if we write stories, to make sure we don't stray too far from what these mean, just in the same way that we read Torah, right? There are certain things you can do with Torah, ways that you can interpret it, and as long as you don't use it to prove that there are many gods, you're in fairly safe territory, right? You've got to stick within those guardrails.
That's great. I've been wondering when we were going to get to sort of this type of topic of, right, even in MCU, DCEU, whatever you want to talk about in terms of the movies and TV shows, this exact piece of they're taking pieces and messing around, and I'm totally fine. There's a lot of people who are like, that wasn't like the source material. I can't watch it. It is too much for me. I don't know, Ethan, if you get this in the Star Wars, Star Trek universe as much, right? When they shift things, right? As long as the core piece of who they are is there, I'm fine with it. They can mess around all they want. It's there, even in the comic books, like those people that are complaining about the movies and TV shows, the comic books constantly shift around what is told about that person or how they came to be or whatever it is. But those core pieces are always there. And they don't, well, if they complained, I guess we're not in those forums, right? I'm not a part of those.
Barack, when I think of a group of people who don't nitpick and micro, look at small changes and things, I definitely think of Star Trek and Star Wars fans. So.
Especially the Jewish ones.
Yeah.
You're
Jewish
not known
never
for nitpicking. No,
Right.
not at all.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I'm a big fan of just creativity and exploration and
So
wondering.
Barack, let me ask you a question then. Is it okay then that you can name a movie Multiverse of Madness even if you only really see a few universe sides?
No, I told you I wasn't okay with it because, and you're saying the opposite. You're saying you should stick to the source material. I'm saying that wasn't core to the source material. If you haven't heard our argument already, go back one episode to episode 6 and listen to our
And
movie
send us an
Midrash and
email
stuff
to let us know how wrong Barack is.
like this. Great.
This has really been, around here we talk about geek Torah stuff fairly regularly. I'm lucky in that.
How often are you around here with us? Are you like just listening?
No, I mean, not just in this podcast, but I mean here in my house, right? This is a regular feature of my life. But it is nice to be able to do this with other people, and to give people this sort of insight into it, right? This sense of bringing people into a conversation. It's one thing to be thinking something in your head. It's another to have a partner who's willing to talk about it with you. Willing, if not, maybe enthusiastic. But to be here with you guys and to have this deep dive, and I don't know if, there's any way. I would love to imagine there's sort of these listener response videos up on TikTok, people putting up, podcast audio from Torah Smash and then jumping in with their thoughts.
I hope so. I hope we haven't found it yet.
I would love
This
that.
is a conversation.
It's going to be the nitpickers. Well, in this episode, Ethan said this, but actually in this.
Yeah, but that's what Torah is, or at least that's the way we read Torah, right? Is that we comment on it. Torah, Midrash, it's a conversation over generations. Comic books are the same at this point. They've been around for nearly 100 years in their modern form, and they need to evolve. We need to be talking about them. We need to see them change and grow and be continually relevant. And I don't remember if I'm talking about comics or Torah, so it's probably both.
100%.
But yeah, this podcast is a great example of that, a way to really have that deep dive, see where the relevance is, see what it means to us personally, and just enjoy, reveling in it.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead.
Can we also just because you're, like you mentioned, you talk about this all the time in your home, your world embodies what a Torah Smash is.
Yeah.
Why don't you take a minute, send us to all of your websites, give us the commercial for Isaac Brynjegard-Bialik.
Is there a commercial?
Just this will be on for decades and decades for our dozens of listeners. So make sure it's not time sensitive.
Until the cloud crashes and we all wind up in Blade Runner 2049.
Right. And we're back to cassette tapes and people have to download this off their boombox.
I got to admit, that's my favorite explanation for why old movies that take place in the future look like the past. I think Blade Runner did that the best. But sure, yes, I'd be glad to plug what I do. So if you're interested in seeing what I do, which is cutting up comics and putting them back together to explore stories about the Torah, my website is nicejewishArtist.com. I intentionally picked something that would be impossible to forget. I will repeat it, though, just in case. nicejewishArtist.com. If you're interested in what I do with my wife, which is, taking this art and these conversations and workshops on the road, that's papermidrash.com. Paper, MIDRASH. It's not an ad for us. It's just because we have stuff out there that perhaps you will find interesting. I think of my art the same way that I think about this podcast. It's supposed to be the beginning of a conversation. It's not an answer. It's not an end. It's, and now what do you think?
And I'll put these in the show notes also for people who are listening. So
I'll add that as a congregation, we have brought Paper Midrash to our congregation. It was wonderful, and everyone needs to do it. And as a gift for a retiring member of my synagogue, I went to Nice Jewish Artist and commissioned a piece of art that is amazing and perfect. And so
I wanted to talk about that piece with you. That was what I was going to talk about, but I knew you'd already know. I couldn't surprise you. But
wait, and you gifted them one of his pieces?
Yeah.
You know, my birthday's coming up. Well, go ahead.
Nope. I won't spoil the surprise.
I was just going to say I've been a huge fan of your work for many years now. I discovered you when I was in LA, so I'm very excited that you came on. It's been really nice to have you with us here, and I think I speak for us unanimously as puppets, or however you want me to speak for you, that we would love to have you back and nerd out with us again on the podcast. I think you brought a really nice, different perspective that at least Ethan doesn't have.
Amen. So,
yes.
Wow.
Wow.
And Ethan, that's unfortunately how we decided to break this news to you. I hope you've got a side hustle.
I mean, as long as you're not killing me off, that's fine. I mean, I feel like I have to legitimately ask that.
You shouldn't have worn. I think if you didn't wear a red shirt tonight, you would have been just fine.
Oh my goodness! Tell me we're going to do an episode about John Scalzi red shirts. Oh my God!
Keep on listening, and you'll find out.
What a teaser! What a teaser that is.
All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to throw out to us about Moon Knight, Egypt, anything before we wrap this up?
I mean, other than to remind you to make sure you get those mezuzahs checked so that the angel of death doesn't come in and, make you an apprentice to Khonshu or whatever happens. I don't know. I guess.
I wish I knew that earlier. I feel like we should have like a Bob Barker ending of like, get your pet spayed and neutered. Like, get your mezuzahs checked, everybody.
No, I should say, in fact, don't have your mezuzahs checked. It's a scam. The mezuzah industry, big mezuzah, doesn't want you to know this.
You should get your mezuzah spayed and neutered instead.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Or maybe have one in the shape of a spade, and you can have a shovel and a rake. You can have like a whole little, set of
tool-based mezuzot.
I have no advice to leave you with other than read some Moon Knight comics. They're fun.
Awesome. Nice. Well, that'll do it for let's say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's like an awkward three-person thank you. Like usually there's a giant. Let's everybody give a big round of applause and say thank you to Isaac. And there's thank you. Awesome. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. This episode is supported in part by Sinai and Synapses, which offers people a worldview that is both scientifically grounded and spiritually uplifting. They provide tools and language for learning and living to those who see science as their ally as they pursue personal growth and the repair of our world. Sinai and Synapses equip scientists, clergy, and dedicated lay people with knowledge and skills to become role models, ambassadors, and activists for grappling with the biggest and most important questions we all face. To learn more, visit www.sinaiandsynapses.org. We want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to torahsmash.com to find where to connect with us online, email us directly, find previous episodes, and more. And no matter the topic, in brightest day and blackest night, no Jewish connection shall escape our sight. To those who worship the Lord Almighty and love superpowers, go and hit subscribe.
I, for one, don't think this could have gone any better.